Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode on Laidback, the Zinga podcast. And our topic for this week is the human side of immigration law, the stories behind the cases. And our guest for this week is Shazia Ali. Shazia is the founder and director of Scarsdale Solicitors, a law firm that provides expert legal advice on private criminal defense, immigration, and divorce. Shazia grew up in poverty, so her law firm is focused on making legal advice and services more accessible to the less privileged and underserved communities. Hello, Shazia. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, again, this is the same question I ask everybody at the start of the podcast. Is this your very first time on the podcast?
It's my first time with you, but no, I've been on other podcasts as well.
Fair,
I've had the privilege of meeting a few lovely people.
fair enough. Fair enough. So, what are your expectations for today since this is your first time on our own podcast?
Expectations. Oh, you've caught me off guard there. Well, just to be honest, just to ensure that we give as much value as we can to the public that listen to your podcast. And if there's any questions, they could always reach out after the podcast. Anything that I've not clarified, perhaps they could comment or reach out to us directly, and we can answer any questions they have. But I think the purpose is just to add value to your audience, really.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, but let's start off with your childhood experiences. Okay, you grew up in
Okay.
in poverty. So, how do you think your childhood experiences with poverty actually shape your view of justice and fairness?
Oh my word. Well, I grew up in a household where becoming a lawyer wasn't something people expected. In fact, it was felt like a world so far away from what I'm currently living. I knew at the time when I was being raised that education was the only thing that I had that would shape my future, that could change my future. I've always been very strong-minded, strong-willed. If I need something, I go and get it. Maybe not so vocal as a child, but as I got older, I became a lot more confident, and I realized that advocacy, speaking for people, was probably my niche, my forte. Um, I wanted to give people a voice, and that's why I'm a lawyer today. It did definitely shape my career. I a lot of people that we deal with are that they have no funds. They don't have the means to actually help themselves, and I understand from my background how overwhelming that can feel. I recall the days at university where I literally one day I only had £1 in my pocket, and I was like, well, how am I going to survive? How am I going to manage the next couple of days without food? And I lived off a can of Heinz beans. But yeah, but that was me, and everything that happened in my past has definitely shaped who I am today.
Mm. So, at an early age, you realized that education was your path to success, if I may put it that way. And then you
Yes.
realized as you grew older, became a lawyer, you realized that having a voice for other people would actually benefit them as well. So when did you do you remember the moment you realized law could be a way for you to actually change other people's lives?
Yes, I remember I was at university. I so can I tell you what happened before that? So if that helps,
Yeah.
I've worked since I was 14 years old. I paid for my own uniform. I got myself into college. I then subsequently went to university. I happened to fall into law. That's complete transparency because I felt that I needed to study. And when I was doing my law degree, um, certain experiences around me shaped what was happening, and I realized, oh gosh, I can be the difference. I can make a difference in people's lives. And one of them was actually an incident, a car accident, which resulted in somebody being involved in a car accident, not knowing exactly what to do, panicking, and he was then subsequently prosecuted for causing death by dangerous driving, and that destroyed his life. He went to prison, and it destroyed him. It destroyed who he was. It destroyed his whole future. I realized at that time, if he had the right support, if he had somebody fighting his corner, things would have been different. So he fell into the system, which is a legal aid system, and the legal aid system, you get as much as you possibly can. You know, people do fight your corner, but I do feel that more could have been done for him, and his life would have been a completely different way had things changed at that point in his life. So that was the deciding factor for me. I decided then to go to do the BBC, which is the bar school. I went studied there, and then almost immediately after that, I after completed my bar vocational course, I applied for various jobs. In fact, I recall I mentioned this the other day to one of my staff members that I applied for 143 positions. I sent my CV out to 143 law firms, and within 3 weeks, I'd got an interview. And the first interview that I was successful. He liked the way I presented myself, even though I had not had an office job before, and that was the starting of my career.
Mm. But but do you think your upbringing, your childhood experiences, do you think that actually influence the kind of clients you actually serve today? I understand you just talked about the story of the guy that went to prison and how he actually shaped you to actually go to law school. But do you think your upbringing, your childhood experiences actually influences has an influence on the kind of clients you actually serve today?
Um, I think my upbringing has shaped what I do as a lawyer. Um, I'm not one to discriminate. So you can be a taxi driver, you could be stocking shelves at Asda, or you could be a CEO of a director of a business. You know, it doesn't. For me, I see no difference. I'm here to serve everybody that wishes to use our services. So being raised in poverty has helped me not shape the kind of clients I have, but it's helped me be more empathetic to the people that I give a voice to.
Yeah.
So I serve the community at large, and it doesn't make a difference who you are, where you're from. However, I am more empathetic to people that have struggled with the similar struggles that I face, because I know how hard it was for me when I wasn't able to fend for myself, you know, for when I couldn't speak or when I didn't have as much confidence as I do now.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay. Now linking it now to immigration and immigrants, right? Because the experiences of immigrants are also different. Assuming the person was born in the UK, totally two different experiences, right? So,
Absolutely.
what do you think people actually misunderstand about immigration law?
I think people don't see the human story about immigration law. They just see what media feeds the wider public.
Yeah.
Um, they don't see every immigration case is a human story. Many of my clients, everyone I've served, pro bono or otherwise, they have been frightened, they've fled from domestic violence, or they've been sexually trafficked into the UK. They're victims, and people don't see that. They see what the media feeds them.
Hmm. Okay. But do you think that's because of the woman side of things? Do you think that's what makes immigration law to be emotionally different from other areas of law?
Absolutely. So, immigration law often involves vulnerable people who do not fully understand the legal system, and they need more time, they need more empathy, they need hand holding services. And that's completely different, absolutely different. People do not see that. The media shapes what we hear and what we see,
Yeah.
but they don't see the human source story behind each vulnerable immigration person that that is fleeing violence,
Mm.
that's come here for fear to their safety. They're not here to, they're here to create a better life for themselves and their family. Um, and one thing people don't realize about immigration law is behind every file is a human story. Often people come to us when they're frightened about losing their home, their stability, or even being separated from their children. And immigration law is just not about paperwork. You're dealing with someone's entire life.
Mm. So talking about human story now, like because you mentioned most of the immigration cases are about human stories. People are behind each file. So what's the human story that often exists behind maybe like visa refusal or deportation? Because we hear people we hear in the news all the time this person has been deported or so number of people have been deported, and it just makes you know, but they don't realize these are people who are actually you are talking about who actually came here for a better life. So
Absolutely.
what's the human story that often exists behind these
So
deportation cases?
it varies, and I'll give you examples. I can only base it on my own experiences. So I've had a lady that was abandoned so she's gone on a family holiday with her family, her husband, her children. Once there, she was abandoned. Now, whilst in the UK, she was a victim of domestic violence. When she was then left in a remote village abroad, and she was abandoned there. Her passport, all the documents were taken from her. Her children were taken from her, and and she was traumatized. For in a moment, her whole life had changed. We helped her with the support of the local councillors. We helped her return back to the UK, reunite with her children. But it was a long journey for us, and we had to get the local councillors involved in order to help her come back to the UK and reunite with her children. I've had other victims. I've had couples from many countries. We deal with a lot of um, countries, but predominantly, like at the moment, we're dealing with a lot of people from Nigeria. And there's a particular couple, absolutely amazing people, professional, educated, bright, but they were being victimized in Nigeria because of their own beliefs, their own values. They came here for a better life, and they struggled when they came to the UK. They came here to be together, to live a normal life without the cultural barriers that were being placed on them from their home villages. Now, I'm not to say, by the way, all of Nigeria is the same, but I'm just giving you an example in this case. They were targeted, they were beaten, they were tortured in their home country. They came here, they used our services, we helped them get through, and now, thankfully, several years on, in fact, now we're helping them get indefinite leave to remain because they're living and they're working. They're not reliant on the taxpayer. They're supporting themselves. They created a better life for themselves in the UK. There are a couple of stories that we have. We've had victims, children that have been raped in the UK, and they've been abandoned by their parents. They've been raped in the UK. Often the media do not show that side of people, that they've been trafficked into the country, they've been raped and abused for all throughout their childhood. Like, where are they supposed to go? Are they supposed to return back to the country where those people sent them here to be trafficked, to be subjected to further abuse? I disagree. They should be supported. They should be able to live in a society where they're not in fear.
Hmm. That's you're giving some instances now, but out of all the clients you've served, when they first come to you, what's their emotional state like?
Traumatized.
Okay.
I've had people crying in the office, upset. In fact, I've been sat in the office crying with them. I'm a very emotional person, so Scarsdale's is about providing a genuinely human approach to every case and trying to support our clients and their mental well-being. So when they hear, we've had, I've had people in reception not being able to speak, for a good few minutes because they're traumatized by their emotional upbringing. Then there's been, um, people, phoning us for support, often instructing us over the phone, but they've been victims of torture. Some of them can be domestic violence, some of them can be cultural differences in their society, some of them are bisexual, homosexual. There's every different life, different sort of scenarios. We've dealt with almost all of them as part of Scarsdale's, and and they are they are human and they are emotional. We've, like I said, I've had a woman collapse in.
Oh,
She was
wow.
shopping in Lidl when I phoned her and said to her, look, can you take a call and just speak to me for a couple of seconds. And when I shared the good news that her visa had been granted, she passed out. She collapsed in a
Wow.
shopping center. Yeah, so this is the kind of emotion that
Yeah.
people don't see. That woman was traumatized, and she'd been through so much. And after 11 years of uncertainty, we've given her that confidence that, you know what, there is hope.
Yeah.
She passed out, and thankfully there was a security person there that supported her. She was back on the phone after a few minutes, but that they're the kind of emotional reactions that we get from our clients. And almost always when they first come to Scarsdale, they're very traumatized, very emotional, very shaken. Most of our clients have been subjected to a lot of abuse, and the type of abuse is horrendous. It's not what you and I, it's not a punch or a kick or something on an isolated event. Is a propensity of violence directed towards them for a period of time. This is why they come to the UK, to get that support, to live without fear.
Mm. So I'm going to take you back to what you said about uncertainty. But before that, right? You mentioned the lady you called that was a lady that passed out after you broke the good news.
She collapsed. Yeah,
Yeah.
she absolutely
So
collapsed.
would you say that's the hardest emotional moment you've experienced as an immigration lawyer?
No, I've had. It makes me emotional when I speak about it, but I've had children raped, so
Okay. So now let's go back to uncertainty, like I mentioned. So how do you think fear and uncertainty actually affect the people you represent?
sorry, could you repeat that question?
How do you think uncertainty and fear actually affect the people you represent or you serve?
How do I think the
Uncertainty and
oh,
fear,
uncertainty?
yeah, actually
Okay.
affects the people you serve
Well,
and represent.
I, I I believe the uncertainty and fear prevents them from actually seeking support. Um, they feel hopeless and they continue to live with that uncertainty. But it's when external people get involved, when they have, like, for example, they may go to like a food bank. I mean, I spent a lot when I first set up Scarsdales. I spent a year in a food bank doing a law clinic, and people would come in and they didn't know that there was a facility that you can actually get legal help, and you can get it without having to pay, and you can be signposted to support like legal aid solicitors if they have the capacity to take it on. But it's unfortunately that they come without speaking English, they don't have the right support, they're not signposted to the right organizations. They come to these charities just to get food, put clothes on their children's back. And that's where the most change can take place, is when they're signposted to the right organizations and they get the right support. Unfortunately, the fear uncertainty prevents them from getting what they need, because they live in fear. They're scared to get the actual help they need.
Mm, I agree with that. But how do you now balance professional objectivity with human empathy? Because it's not easy listening to all these people without breaking down emotionally.
Absolutely, and I do break down a lot, especially with these type of situations. But what motivates me is the impact of what I do. When someone walks into my office feeling hopeless and leaves with clarity and hope, that's an incredible, powerful ability to have. And law is always about changing people's lives, okay? Irrespective of what it is, it's about changing people's life, and more so in immigration than any other area of law. And that's what I'd like to do. My legacy is to leave with making a huge impact on as many people who come to us that use Scarsdale solicitors. And that's what I'd like to be, a voice for the voiceless.
Mm. And you just mentioned that law is a way to change people's lives, right? But how do you think immigration law actually intersects with dignity, belonging, and identity.
Sorry, could you repeat that
So
question?
I said you just mentioned that law is all about changing people's lives. So if you
Yes.
link it back now to immigration law, so how do you think immigration law intersects with dignity, identity, and belonging?
That's a tough question. Um, Initially, I would say that it's there is no balance initially when they come to us. Um, they have no dignity. They've lost all dignity before coming to us and seeking that support. Um, we are there to help them regain that balance, build that confidence, and I think that's probably the most I can say in relation to that area of that comment, that question, because it's really difficult when you see very vulnerable people that like I mean I have a lot of clients that are suicidal that have come to us and they've lost all hope. You'll have read in the papers recently this year, in fact, a young man, a law student, not a law student, he'd come on a student visa. He couldn't afford a solicitor's support, and he was made homeless because of his situation, because he couldn't return back to his home country. He'd commit suicide, and
Wow.
they're the stories that we hear all the time, and it's sad. We're there to be that, to step in and give these people that support.
Yeah.
So most people come to us when they've lost all hope and that dignity is gone. And this is where it's incredibly powerful to actually help regain that and build that confidence in anybody.
Yeah. But you just mentioned about the young man that actually committed suicide, right? So, but why is it that when politicians talk about immigration, because immigration is a huge part of politics, like
It
that's
is,
what they
yeah.
talk about all the time. Oh, the immigrants are coming to take their jobs, are coming to do this, are coming to do that, right? Why is it that when they talk about immigration, they only look at it from the negative side of things and don't try as much as possible to explain to people who are actually going to vote, and then for them to look at the human side of things? Because you just gave an example of a young chap that just committed suicide because he didn't want to go
Yeah.
back home.
Well, look, I'm not a politician, and this podcast probably not the best platform to discuss what politicians do or don't do. But what I do know is that the politicians, as what I see, is they it's all about economy and economics. They look at the financial side. They don't look at the human approach, the human story. They don't advocate the human story. They just see how is this going to impact our economy? What can we do to reduce the burden on, and they see it as a burden and nothing more. They don't see the human story.
Mm. So,
They don't see that you're dealing with somebody's entire future. They just see from a financial perspective, how is it going to impact society, what the economy is going to be shaped with if there's more people in the country. As you know, changes, immigration is changing all the time.
yeah,
And it would be unfair for me to say anything about immigration changes because 3 months' time, if somebody else is listening to this podcast, it's an ever-changing area of law,
true.
and changes take place all the time. But the the politicians fail to see why people are doing what they do.
Mm.
Then they come in here to get the support because they're fleeing violence.
BetterHelp is the paid partner of this episode. Growing up in Nigeria, mental health was not discussed in our homes. As a man, you are discouraged from showing your emotions as this is seen as a sign of weakness. If this resonates with you, you are not alone. About 62% of adults believe that societal attitudes stop them from seeking mental health support when they need one. And that's why I've teamed up with BetterHelp to stop the stigma around mental health and encourage you to seek mental health support from credentialed therapists when you need one. These credentialed therapists listen, ask questions, and help you to see things from new perspectives in order to improve your life. BetterHelp is on a mission to help you start therapy as easy as possible. If this is something you're interested in, click on the link below or go to betterhelp.com/laidback to match with a credentialed therapist in as little as a couple of days. You can also get 10% off your first month by using my link or the code
Violence.
Laidback. Okay. But I know we're not talking about politics on this podcast, but this is the reason why I asked the question, right? So, because these immigrants and the less privileged people, for example, right, they want to seek legal help and protection, right? Do you think poverty or lack of information or information out there, or do you think there are systemic barriers that actually stop them from actually getting and seeking legal protection?
Education is most definitely a key side of things. Most people are like they flee because they have limited knowledge of what to do. They then live underground. They don't seek help, and unfortunately for them, it's lack of education, but also ignorance. It's when they surround themselves with the right sort of people and start integrating with society in the UK that they are then referred for that external support.
Hmm. But do you think when they don't have proper representation, do you think they often lose their cases?
No, absolutely not. We've had a huge, we, I mean, I'm not saying every case is successful, but we've had, I think 23, 24, 90, above 90% of our immigration cases were successful. I don't know the stats for 2025 or, in this year, but we, we see successful outcomes. It's becoming more tough. We're living in a society where it's a lot more difficult,
No,
but
no, but this is the question I'm trying to ask. You guys give them the proper representation that they really need, yes. But you mentioned that sometimes it's because of education and ignorance, they don't get the right support and the right representation. So I'm just wondering, have you like how often are their cases successful if they don't have the proper representation?
so I wouldn't know how to comment on that because I can only comment on what we do.
Yeah.
And Scarsdale solicitors, I've done law for like since 2001. Good gosh, a long, long period of time. So I can only comment on the work that we do. Um, it's difficult to say if other people are not using the right services and the results that they're getting as a consequence of not being getting the right support. It's very difficult. I can only comment on what we do, and like there's cases that I've done pro bono, which they were granted this year. They were both granted to this year, and I've done that for the council. I've worked and we team up with social workers. We team up with lots of organisations. I've had to team up with counsellors in order to try and get people back in from abroad that have been left abandoned in remote countries, remote villages. So it really depends on reaching out and getting the right support. What that right support is dependent on the situation and who they've spoken to. Not all not all five fingers are the same. All solicitors
True.
are, they're different in their approach, their services. What helps me and what helps shape Scarsdale's is we're just a human. We have a humanitarian approach to things. You're not paperwork. You're not dealing with, we're dealing with people's lives here. And I refuse to actually allow them just to be another number for us. We're here to help as many people as we possibly can and make a difference. And that's what Scarsdales is all about, making a difference. It's why I built Scarsdales. It's my voice to be leveraged and a platform for change.
Hmm. Okay. But taking it back now to our discussion on uncertainty, all right? So, how do you think uncertainty and unresolved emotional, unresolved immigration status actually affect your clients psychologically, not just mentally now or emotionally, psychologically? How do you think it affects them psychologically?
I can only imagine that they're traumatized. Um, the fear, like I've said before, the fear about their future must be an overwhelming feeling. It'd be silly of me to say to you that I understand because I'm not in their situation. But what I do is respect and value what they bring with them. And for me, it's about trying to help them to the best of my ability. I It's like when we've had a number of traumatized clients and we have signposted them to seek independent support from their GPs, from counselling services, from talking therapies. Um, but we're limited because I'm not an expert in that area. I am an expert in law and I can help them get the best possible outcome for their case at the time I do their case. But in relation to mentally, that the best people to comment on that is the experts in that industry. I can only imagine that it must be a terrifying feeling to have all that uncertainty, to have all that abuse in their past, and to be continuing to live with that uncertainty. But it would be silly of me to say that I can understand because I'm not in their situation. I respect and value every client that comes to us.
Yeah, I do understand that, but looking at it from your own perspective and from their own perspective, because you provide a little bit of hope to them, all right? So,
I hope so.
yeah,
I hope
because
so.
of course, but how important do you think um hope is in helping these immigrants actually endure the
Oh,
immigration
it's
process?
it's priceless. It's absolutely priceless. I think hope and communication are the two factors that help my clients. When you speak to your clients and you give them the time they need and they're listened to, they're heard. Most people are not heard and they feel voiceless. So when they come and they speak to us and they speak to us and they ring us every day if need be, when they heard, they feel like they've made a difference in their own lives. And like I said, immigration, they're vulnerable clients. So when they're not being heard, that's going to be an overwhelming feeling. When somebody takes the time out to listen to their story, to give them support, to help them with their bottlenecks, and well, not understand but appreciate their background. That's where the difference makes. That's where we make the difference.
Hmm, okay, but considering you meet a lot of immigrants every day, right? So, what do you see every day dealing with these clients that you would like other people to understand differently about immigrants? Because, like you said in the news, they see a lot of things about immigrants. What do you think you see every day that you would like other people to see? So, for them to change their perception of how they see all the immigrants out there.
They are human. They have a life. They are vulnerable and they need support. They're not just a number. You know, they are there for support. And it's not that they've deliberately evaded immigration laws. They've come because they are in fear and they've come trying to seek support for themselves, for their family. And that's what most media doesn't put forward. All of these immigration clients are vulnerable and they're here just to create a better life for themselves and their children and their families. Is that wrong? Is that wrong to live in hope? Absolutely not.
Yep. But I know we've talked about media and politics, right? But why do you think the public actually failed to see the human cost of immigration systems?
Unfortunately, it's what's put out there, media. The media often portrays the numbers and the laws that the legislation that's now being put in place to help prevent um, these boats arriving from abroad. They just see one
Yeah.
side. It's lack of education. It's lack of education and ignorance that shapes society at the moment, unfortunately. That's why they don't see the human side of things.
Yeah. But if there's someone out there who's dealing with emotional immigration uncertainty at the moment, what advice would you give to the person?
Okay, first thing is definitely seek help. Call, go on to, if you've got internet and can go onto Google, go onto Google. If you've got friends and they've got phones, go onto Google, look for support. Um, there are legal aid practitioners that are willing to take cases on. There's ourselves, guardians, solicitors. We provide pro bono services as well to some cases that are eligible. Um, but just get the right support. It's the direction that most people don't have. Once you've got that direction, it eliminates a little bit of uncertainty. And if you go down the right path, that uncertainty will be far less. Once you've got that hope, you will change that person's life. Even if the outcome isn't what they would hope for, they've still got hope and they will continue to challenge and try and resolve their status. That's the difference. That will be the major changing point in any person's life.
Mm. Okay.
Law isn't about legislation and courtrooms. The court is about people. And if you forget that, you've missed the whole point of being a lawyer. And unfortunately, not everybody's a lawyer, but you have to understand that there is a human story behind each case.
Mm. Yeah. What you just mentioned, that they need to go onto the internet, seek help, find legal aid, and the rest of them. But is there a particular thing? I'm just curious now. Is there a particular thing they must know before they enter any immigration process?
Okay, it depends on their situation. So, for example, if you've if you've not done any applications in the UK and you've come in illegally in the UK, you need to regulise your status. You need to notify the Home Office immediately, because the longer the gap is between you entering the country and claiming asylum, if that's what you'd like to do, that will go against you. It's an adverse inference can be drawn from that gap. So some people come, they stay underground for years and years, and then the Home Office use that against them and say, well, hold on, if you're living in fear, why did you not claim asylum beforehand? Why did you not claim asylum as soon as you entered the country? And there's that uncertainty, that ignorance, lack of knowledge is the one that prevents them from getting status in the UK. It shapes that case, unfortunately.
Mm.
So those people that are listening to this podcast that don't actually have any status, that have come into the UK illegally, or they may have entered legally, but they are currently an overstayer, you need to get the right support immediately. You need to be registered with the Home Office system, because if you're not, you can you can be arrested on the street, you can be put in a detention centre, and you can be
Reported.
deported back home, unfortunately.
Mm. Okay. So you've talked about how law is actually about people, right? That's what law is all about, right? But what does justice actually mean to you personally?
Justice means fairness. For me, that's all it means, is fairness. Giving people a right to a fair trial, giving people a voice to be heard. Justice is about doing the right thing, as far as I'm concerned. And the right thing, as you know, in relation to immigration, which is the subject we're discussing today, is helping those that are most vulnerable and giving them that voice so that they can advocate their personal story and they can become legal in the UK.
Mm. So, what's your most rewarding moment um, or experience as an immigration lawyer?
Um, Honestly, I've had so many. Like that lady collapsing, although it was horrible for her,
Yeah,
it
that's
was so
positive.
emotional for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
The children that were abused, um, brought in to the UK and abused as children for many years. Um, they their status helping them get their status, regularize their status, really had an overwhelming effect on me. There's many cases, you know, the lady that was abandoned abroad, we left her in a remote village, helping her come back to the UK. It was a game changer for her, and it was huge for me. So Scarsdale is about making that difference. And as I said to you previously, like I want to be remembered for the impact I had on everybody else's life, and not like what kind of how big my business is. It's what changes have we brought about, and how are we remembered, how we impact other people's life. I often relate. I use this analogy: is doctors make a difference in people's lives, but so do we as immigration lawyers, because we can be the difference between them having no future, no certainty, and having status, and having a life in the UK. So I, I'd like more people to reach out and use us, and even if it's just for a free consultation, reach out and get the support you need so that you can be signposted to the right support, and you know exactly where you need to be and what to do.
Mm. Okay. So you just mentioned that your law is focused on impact, try as much as possible to leave an imprint in the lives of people out there, right? So
Absolutely.
how do you ensure that your services um, remain accessible to the less privileged and the underserved communities that you're trying to serve?
How do I? So your voice dimmed out for a moment. How
Okay,
do I
sorry.
do what?
So,
Sorry.
so how do you ensure, since you really want to make an impact and leave an imprint in the lives of people, how do you ensure that your law firm and the services you provide, it will remain accessible to the less privileged and the underserved communities?
So our services do. We've always done that. But prior to COVID, we had a pro bono clinic every Wednesday. I was working at a charity and serving, doing a legal clinic there. We continue to provide services for the undersupported, less privileged people in the community because what we do right now is we're offering internships for the people that like for apprenticeships we've offered we're currently hiring at the moment is for the people that don't actually have the right support in the community and we are offering support by way of giving them an opportunity to be somebody different. So we currently are hiring, by the way, just so I'll put it out there. But we've got an apprentice now who is from a very privileged background, and I don't think he would have been given that support had we not taken him on. So we're trying to educate people, give them the training, and support them on their legal careers if that's what they like to do. And we're looking for motivated candidates. We're also setting up we're hoping to set up this year a pro bono legal department, which is dedicated to the most vulnerable members of the community. On, in fact, International Women's Day, I'm making myself available all day for people to book on, go onto our website, book on, and they're getting pro bono services all day from me in order to help the pro bono side of things. So our private work is going to pay for our pro bono work. So the most vulnerable members of the community will not have to pay for the services. We're not quite there yet, but we will get there. But the idea behind Scarsdales is to have a pro bono legal department, and that will serve the most underprivileged members of the community that can actually pay for the support that they need, and they can't wait for legal aid for a year or 6 months or a waiting list on a legal aid register.
Hmm. Okay, that sounds really, really good. And
Thank you.
considering that you've dealt with a lot of immigration cases now, and so you know a lot of human stories behind most of these cases, has has this work actually changed the way you see humanity?
Um, no, in fairness, because we were raised in the underprivileged backgrounds, and I qualified as a solicitor myself. Um, my parents raised us to always see humanity. We've always been, all myself, my siblings, um, we've always had that human approach to everything, every aspect of life. We're the kind of people that if we see an accident occur, we stop the car and run over to them, try and support them to the best of our ability. We could be behind someone in a queue in Asda's, for example, and if the card keeps getting declined, I will offer to pay for that, because we just don't know, there might be a story behind that person. So there's always been a humanitarian approach to the way we were brought up, and it's not shaped who we are. Like, doing law is a service that I provide, but I've always had a humanitarian approach to every aspect of my life, and my siblings too. And I, I like to think that we're viewed as very good people because that's who we are. We're very good people. We like to help as much as we possibly can.
Hmm. Okay. So, because of time now, we're going to round off. So, I'm going to take you
Okay.
back to the same thing I've asked you earlier because we talked about your emotional well-being as well, if you remember earlier.
Okay.
So, how do you protect your mental well-being when you're handling all these emotional heavy cases?
Okay. So over the years, you become more resilient when you're working. I've heard I've had stories of murder, I've had stories of rape, I've had the stories of abuse, abuse over a prolonged period of time, and you you have to do what's best for your client. So you have to put a barrier. There has to be a boundary, and if you don't have that boundary, you will become overwhelmed, and you're not going to get the result for the client. So there are boundaries that have to be adhered to. I've had so many stories in my life that like sometimes I think, good gosh, I'm surprised I'm not in counselling myself. But if you don't have that barrier, I'm not going to get the result that I need for my client. And um, I have to have certainty that I can get the result for the client that they need. So I do have a boundary where I don't cross. I do work, and I do work all hours of the day. I work days, I work evenings, and I'm focused on the results for my clients, but without being emotionally overwhelmed. Because if I'm emotionally overwhelmed, I will not be able to get the result that the client needs.
Hmm. Fair enough. So, but what does being on the human side of the law actually mean to you then?
Being on the human side,
Yeah.
um, it means a lot. It's when I set up my own practice, it helped me change my approach to law. And if you work in a high street law firm, there's no human side to law. It's about paperwork, and it's just about filling out forms, doing the advocacy in court. When I set up the practice, God knows how many years ago, but when I set up the practice, everything changed because I chose the areas that I was fascinated about, which made the most difference to the people that connected with us. And everything we do is a humanized way of dealing with things. Even we don't just deal with immigration, we deal with crime. A lot of our criminal clients have uh, irregular status, and so we know both, and we can help them and put a humanized approach in both areas of their lives, in the criminal side as well as the motoring side. In the criminal side as well as the immigration side.
Hmm. Okay. But because of time, I'm gonna ask you one final question. All right. So, what's that one thing you like, that misconception you like to change today about immigrants and immigration law?
What perception did you say?
Misconceptions.
Misconceptions. What I'd
Yeah.
like to change. They're human. They have a story. They're everyday people like us that have a family and that need support, and they're here just for that support. It's They're not here to immigrants. There's a misconception that most people flee their country of origin to be a burden on the UK's tax system. That's absolutely not the case, because a lot of the visa status do not allow access to public recourse. You're not entitled to state benefits. You're not entitled to free accommodation. So there's a misconception that most migrants are here just to be a burden on the taxpayer, and that's not true. That's not true, because most visas don't allow migrants to claim benefits or claim for council housing or housing benefit or universal credit. A lot of the visas don't allow that.
True. True. So, if there are immigrants out there or anyone who's undergoing uncertainty with immigration and all, how can they reach out to you and connect with you and learn more about your work?
Oh, definitely. So I can tell you my website, which is www.scarsdalesolicitors.com. I'm hoping, Aaron, you'll be able to put a link when the podcast goes
Yeah.
live. Um, you know, uh, we're a Greater Manchester firm, but we cover nationally all of the UK. Um, we can be contacted on 01706 531 827, or you can call me directly on my mobile, which is 07852 Even if I don't answer, if I'm in a meeting, my staff will answer, and I will definitely give you the time. So it may not be there and then, but I will definitely make sure I give you time and I give you direction. Those are two things that I can give you guarantees with. I will give you that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But thank you so much, Shazia, because
Oh,
that's
you're
all. The,
most welcome. I hope it's been useful and value to your audience.
definitely, definitely. And I hope you continue doing the wonderful work and then continue helping humanity because, like you said, these are human cases behind, human stories behind all these immigration cases that people don't talk about. And I hope you continue helping humanity.
We definitely will, with everybody's support. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm grateful to your audience for listening.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Hopefully,
Thank
we'll do this
you.
again.
I hope so.